My name is Jennifer, and I thought I'd locked the past out of my life the day I bought this house. But when I came home to find my estranged sister Melissa sipping wine in my reading chair, surrounded by moving boxes, I realized betrayal sometimes walks right through your front door. She didn't ask. My parents didn't warn me. And now, everything I've built is on the verge of collapse unless I fight to take it back. But before I dive in, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. I slammed the front door harder than I meant to. The sound echoed down the hallway like a warning shot, but it was already too late for warnings. There she was, Melissa, wearing one of my old silk robes like it belonged to her. One leg slung over the side of my reading chair, a half-empty wine glass perched on the armrest. My wine glass, my chair, my piece gone. I stood frozen for a moment, blinking at the surreal scene, heart thudding. There were moving boxes stacked by the fireplace. Her duffel bags were already unpacked, shoes kicked under the console table. It was like she'd been living here for days instead of hours. "What is this?" I managed, my voice cracking on the last syllable. Melissa didn't even flinch. She took another sip and smiled like we were catching up at a brunch neither of us had paid for. "Hey, Jenny," she said, all syrup and smugness. "I didn't think you'd be home so early." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The words got stuck somewhere between rage and confusion. Behind me, I heard soft footsteps. I turned to see my parents, both of them, Alina and Thomas, standing sheepishly in the foyer like teenagers caught sneaking out. My mother clutched her purse like a shield. "Jennifer, let's not start this way," she said. "Melissa needed a place. She's going through a rough time." My father nodded in support, avoiding eye contact. She had nowhere else to go. I stared at them both, trying to decipher what they were really saying. Melissa had nowhere else to go, so they gave her my address. "You let her move in without telling me," I whispered. "This is my house." Alina's voice was all faux soothing. "We didn't think you'd mind, it's just temporary." "She just lost her lease," my father added. "And, well, we figured this would be a good chance for you two to reconnect." "Reconnect?" I repeated, stunned. "We haven't spoken in 3 years, Dad." Melissa chimed in then, not a hint of shame in her voice. "Family helps family, right?" That one sentence lit something inside me. I had bent over backwards for this family, paid for our mother's prescriptions when her insurance lapsed, drove Dad to appointments when his hip went out, hosted every holiday so they wouldn't have to lift a finger. And now the sister who once called me an uptight control freak at Thanksgiving, who drained our father's savings for her consulting business and ghosted us when it failed, was sipping Cabernet in my chair like she owned the place. I walked into the living room, each step purposeful. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, directing the question at my mother. Her lips tightened. "Jennifer, please don't make a scene." "Oh, so now it's me making the scene?" I asked, letting the sarcasm slip through. "Not the part where you let someone move into my house without asking." "She just moved in today," my father muttered. "Barely had time to unpack." But that wasn't true. I saw the photos already hanging in the hallway. Hers and mine, side by side, like we were some bonded, smiling sisterhood, like history hadn't happened. Melissa raised her glass and said softly, "Relax, sis, it's just for a little while." And that's when I realized I wasn't being asked. I was being managed. Boxed into a decision someone else made, like always. I looked at the three of them, my parents with their averted eyes, Melissa with her fake grin, and understood exactly where I stood. Not as a daughter, not as a sister, as a resource. And something deep inside me whispered, "Not this time." The next morning, I stood in my own kitchen feeling like a stranger. The tile beneath my feet was cold, the silence brittle. I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug like it could keep more than just my fingers warm, like it could anchor me to the reality I had woken up to. Melissa had moved in, without warning, without discussion. And somehow, my parents had decided it was not only acceptable, but reasonable, as if my name on the mortgage didn't mean what I thought it did. I heard her before I saw her. That familiar lightness in her step, the exaggerated yawn meant to announce her presence. She breezed in wearing designer pajamas that didn't match her financial hardship, sob story, and grinned like we were still kids playing pretend. "Morning, Rumi," she said cheerfully, opening the fridge like it belonged to her. I watched as she pulled out the oat milk I'd bought the night before, poured a generous splash into a new mug, also mine, and helped herself to the last blueberry scone. The one I had set aside, for myself. "You're up early," I murmured. She shrugged. "I couldn't sleep. So much excitement lately, you know." She took a bite of the scone and moaned a little too dramatically. "God, these are good. You always had great taste." I stared at her, trying to decide if she was being intentionally antagonistic or just genuinely that oblivious. I suspected the former. Melissa had always known how to twist the knife while smiling sweetly. I sipped my coffee. "So, what's your plan?" She looked up, surprised. "Plan? You said you needed a place for now. That usually implies next steps." Melissa chuckled like I'd made a joke. "Oh, that? Well, I quit my job last week, so technically I'm finally free." "Free," I blinked. "You quit." She nodded proudly, taking another bite of scone. "Toxic environment. My manager was a narcissist, and I just couldn't do it anymore." "And now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "How are you planning to pay rent?" She waved her hand like I'd asked about the weather. "Jennifer, you make good money. You can handle a little extra until I get back on my feet." I felt my jaw tighten. "You weren't evicted, were you?" Her expression didn't change, but she took a moment too long to answer. "It wasn't technically an eviction, just an unfortunate timing thing. My landlord was unreasonable." Unreasonable. That word again. She always used it when someone dared to expect something from her. Rent, effort, accountability. "Melissa," I said carefully, "this house isn't a shelter. You can't just land here like it's some sort of reset button." She tilted her head, feigning hurt. "Wow, that's harsh." "No, it's honest." She set down her mug, smile gone. "Mom said you'd be difficult about this, but I didn't think you'd throw that in my face day one." I blinked. "Throw what?" "That you bought this place, that you're the responsible one, the golden child. I get it, Jennifer, you win." I was stunned silent. For a moment, I saw something raw flash across her face, bitterness maybe. Jealousy, definitely. But then it was gone, buried beneath that glossy facade she wore so well. "I'm not trying to win anything," I said softly. "I just want peace in my own home." She leaned against the counter, folding her arms. "Then maybe stop acting like I'm the enemy. You ever think about that?" Enemy. No, I hadn't thought about that. Because no matter how strained things had been between us, no matter how many times she'd disappeared only to reappear needing help, she was still my sister. Or at least she had been. But now, standing here in my kitchen, sipping my coffee and eating my scone while telling me I was difficult, she felt like a stranger who'd learned all my weak spots and planned to live in them rent-free. Melissa turned and walked out of the kitchen, humming some pop song I couldn't place. And just like that, the morning air felt heavier than it had any right to. I looked around the room. A room, suddenly hyper-aware of every misplaced detail. Her shoes by the door. Her scarf draped over the dining chair. The extra toothbrush I hadn't noticed last night now parked beside mine in the bathroom. She was embedding herself. Slowly, casually, permanently. And deep down, I knew it wasn't just the house she was after. It was control. By the time Friday rolled around, I was already rehearsing conversations in my head. Conversations I'd never have. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew they'd go nowhere. Logic was wasted on people who preferred narratives over facts. And in this house, Melissa was already rewriting the script. I got home later than usual that evening. Work had run over and I stopped for groceries, mostly because I needed to feel like I still had some control over my space. Carrying the bags inside, I instantly noticed something wrong. My living room had changed. My vintage armchair, an avocado green 1960s piece I had restored by hand, was gone. In its place stood a crystal lamp I'd never seen before, sitting atop a gaudy mirrored side table that looked like it had been stolen from a hotel lobby in Vegas. For a moment, I just stood there, bags at my feet, blinking like I'd walked into the wrong house. "Melissa," I called out, my voice low and cold. She appeared from down the hallway, looking way too pleased with herself. "Hey, you're home late. What do you think? Doesn't the new setup just breathe light into the room?" "Where's my armchair?" She blinked innocently. "Oh, that old thing. It didn't really vibe with the new aesthetic. I moved it to the garage." "You what?" She held up a manicured hand. "Relax, I didn't throw it out. I just thought this look was more elevated." elevated. Like my taste, my home wasn't good enough for her curated, Pinterest-fueled delusions. "You don't get to redecorate my house without asking," I said, sharper now. Melissa rolled her eyes. "It's just a lamp and a table. You act like I knocked down a wall." I wanted to scream. But instead, I walked to the kitchen, set the groceries on the counter, and took a breath. This wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about invasion, erosion, tiny thefts that didn't feel like thefts until they added up to everything. I didn't say another word. I just gathered my laundry basket and headed down the hall to the guest room, her room now, apparently. The door was ajar, and the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. That chill of something not quite right. Melissa was messy, sure, but this wasn't mess. This was curated chaos. Open makeup bags, a tipped-over wine glass, magazines fanned out on the bed like props. And then I saw it. A letter, no, an envelope poking out from beneath her laptop case. My name was typed across the front in block letters. Not hers, not our parents'. Mine. Curious, I picked it up. It was from my bank. I frowned. Melissa hadn't mentioned anything about my mail being delivered here. I opened the envelope and scanned the page, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't a letter addressed to her in care of me. It was a notice, a formal warning about overdue payments on an account tied to my address, using my name as a listed contact. At the bottom was a faint reference to shared occupancy. My hand shook as I read it again, slower this time. It didn't make full sense yet, but it was enough to whisper something dangerous. She's hiding something and using me to do it. I took a shaky breath, stuffed the letter back in the envelope, and slid it quietly into my own bag. Then I turned to leave. As I passed by her open closet, something else caught my eye. A box, jet black, locked. It was shoved behind a row of unworn heels, almost hidden but not quite. I didn't open it, not yet, because I knew somehow I'd be coming back for it. Back in my bedroom, I closed the door gently and leaned against it. This wasn't about sisterly chaos anymore. This was intentional, tactical, dangerous. She hadn't just moved into my home. She was building a cover story, one made of crystal and casual lies, staged like a set waiting for a scene I hadn't agreed to be in. And it hit me like a whisper in the dark. Melissa wasn't crashing here to get back on her feet. She was staging a takeover. And if I didn't act soon, I'd be the one written out of my own life. It had to be after midnight when I finally made the decision. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. That black box from Melissa's closet burned into my mind like it was glowing under a spotlight. Something about it haunted me. The sleekness. The lock. The fact that she'd hidden it, but not too well, like she wanted it close but didn't want it seen. My instincts screamed louder with every passing hour. I pulled on my robe, crept down the hallway, and opened her door as quietly as I could. She was a deep sleeper, always had been, but still my heart pounded like I was committing a crime in my own home. Her breathing was steady. I tiptoed to the closet, slipped behind the clothes, and knelt. The box was heavier than I expected. Matte black metal. I ran my fingers along the edge, no label, no design, just a small keyhole. I almost gave up. But then I remembered something. Melissa had always been careless with hiding things after 3 glasses of wine. Earlier tonight, I'd seen her throw her purse onto the armchair in the hallway after bragging to herself in the mirror. I crept out, snatched the bag, and dug through. Bingo. The key was tucked inside a lipstick case. Back in the guest room, I turned the lock with shaking hands. The click felt louder than thunder. Inside, I found a neatly stacked collection of documents. Too neat. Curated like the magazines on her bed. On top, printed bank statements. Dozens of them. But not hers, my father's, with forged signatures. My breath caught. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, careful to keep the pages in order, reading by the soft glow of my phone screen. They weren't just statements, they were applications. Loans, credit line requests, financial forms, and they all looked like they had been submitted in his name. Melissa's handwriting was all over the margins. Little notes, underlines, dates, and tucked underneath them, receipts. Payments to shell companies I didn't recognize. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. No, I could. That was the most terrifying part, because the signs had always been there. Melissa was good at burying bombs in beautiful wrapping paper. She wasn't just lying to me. She was manipulating everyone, my parents, banks, even my father's identity. I heard a creak in the hallway and froze, but no one came. I knew I couldn't confront her yet, not without proof in hand, not without a plan. I carefully put everything back inside the box except the most damning 5 pages. Those I slid into a manila folder under my arm. As I left the room, I paused at the doorway and looked back. She looked so peaceful, tangled in my guest sheets like they belonged to her, like she didn't just plant a financial grenade inside our family. She had the face of someone who believed she could lie forever. The next morning, I didn't say a word to her. Instead, I met my best friend Erica at our usual downtown cafe, 2 streets over from the courthouse, where everything suddenly felt relevant. She noticed my face before I even sat down. "Okay," she said, lowering her sunglasses. "What happened?" I slid the folder across the table. "Read." Erica flipped through the pages, brow furrowing. These are fake." "I know. And these account numbers, this is your dad's info." I nodded. "Melissa's using his identity to secure credit." She sat back, stunned. "That's not just shady, that's criminal." I looked out the window, watching people laugh on the sidewalk as if the world wasn't tilting sideways. "She's not just lying," I whispered. "She's dangerous." Erica leaned in. "You need to get ahead of this, call a lawyer, pull a full credit report on your family, check public records. If she's opened accounts, they'll show up. And Jennifer," she touched my arm, "this could ruin him." I nodded slowly, swallowing the fear rising in my throat. "I know, that's why I can't let it go." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my bedroom floor with the documents spread out around me, trying to map it all out. Her timing, her language, the way she spoke to my parents like they owed her something. I remembered the moment she walked in on move-in day, raising that wine glass. Family helps family, right? But Melissa wasn't here to be helped. She was here to destroy us, slowly, surgically, from the inside out. And now I had the proof. The only question left was, what would I do with it? If there was anyone in my life who could stare at a stack of financial chaos without flinching, it was Charles. He wasn't just my boyfriend. He was a systems analyst with a mind like a scalpel, quiet, methodical, and terrifyingly precise. The kind of man who could spot inconsistencies the way artists notice brushstrokes. And thank God for that. Because I needed someone with logic when all I had left was instinct and panic. I sat across from him on his worn leather couch that Saturday afternoon, the manila folder between us like a ticking bomb. The blinds were drawn, the room dim and quiet except for the occasional soft thump of his pen against the armrest. "This," I said finally, "is what I found in her closet." Charles didn't say anything. He just opened the folder, his eyes scanning line by line, flipping pages with slow, deliberate movements. Halfway through, he looked up. "She's not just borrowing, this is calculated." My stomach dropped. "How bad?" He reached for a notepad. "These fake forms, they're from lenders that cross-check employment and ID history, but she must have used outdated or falsified employment info for your father because most of these were approved." "Approved?" I echoed. He nodded. "She's pulled at least 2 open lines of credit under his name, and I think 1 under your mother's. Look, this account was opened 3 months ago. There's already a balance of $14,600. I rubbed my forehead, the pressure building behind my eyes. Why would she do this? She's not desperate. She's performing, acting like she's fine, like she's winning. "Because she's been riding the appearance of stability," Charles replied, circling something on the page. "But it's a lie. This isn't about getting by. It's about keeping a facade going long enough to escape the fallout." I stared at the papers again, overwhelmed. "So she's a fraud artist now." Charles was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, "She's dangerous, Jen." I flinched. "I don't just mean she's reckless," he added. "I mean she's built a version of herself that depends on manipulation, and she's made you her foundation. Your house, your reputation, your silence." I looked at him, something tightening in my chest. "I think you've been trying to protect your parents," he said gently. "But if you don't do something now, you won't be able to." He was right, and it hurt to hear, because deep down I'd been trying to shield them from the truth, from what Melissa had become, from the unbearable humiliation of knowing their child was capable of forging their names and draining their security. But that wasn't my job, it never had been. "I don't want to destroy them," I whispered. "You're not," Charles said firmly. "You're saving them." We spent the next hour cross-checking information. I logged into public databases, pulled credit reports, and accessed county records. And then we found it. Melissa's name, listed as a partner on a defunct LLC, Madrona Property Services, based in Portland. An address that didn't exist anymore. A bankruptcy filing. And a lawsuit, quietly settled, involving $62,000 in damages after a real estate deal collapsed. She nearly bankrupted someone already, Charles said, staring at the screen. She's done this before. I felt a cold chill run up my spine. That's why she's here. She's hiding from it. She thinks she can rebuild her story using my life. Charles closed the laptop, his face hardening. She won't do it again, he said. Not to you, not to them. I nodded slowly, swallowing the burn of betrayal that rose up like bile. I'm going to stop her, I said, but I'm going to need more than proof. You need a plan, he said simply. Yes, and allies, but not my parents, not yet. They still think she's the poor, misunderstood sister. Charles placed his hand over mine. Then we'll be strategic. And that's how it began, not with a confrontation, not with a fight, but with two people at a kitchen table, a folder full of lies, and the resolve to drag the truth into daylight page by page. We didn't want to draw attention. That's why we chose the parking space instead of Charles's apartment or my house. Neutral ground. Quiet. And more importantly, out of Melissa's orbit. Charles sat across from me, his laptop open, documents fanned out on the table like a case file. The sun filtered through the high windows, casting everything in a gentle light that felt completely disconnected from the dark reality we were uncovering. He clicked through records while I sipped stale coffee, trying to keep my nerves from boiling over. You're sure she used the LLC to funnel money? I asked, watching his screen. He didn't look up. I'm sure. He tapped the keyboard and turned the laptop toward me. On the screen, a real estate investment form tied to Madrona Property Services. But the signature field, that's what caught my eye. It wasn't my father's name, it was mine. Except I had never seen that document before in my life. My pulse thundered. That's fraud, I whispered. She forged my name now. Charles nodded grimly. I ran a signature match. The handwriting's altered, but the data is enough. She used your home address, attached your name to the LLC's revival last year, and filed a project summary that never actually happened. I felt like the floor shifted beneath me. She's digging a new hole, I muttered, using me to cover the old one. Charles leaned in. Jen, if this goes public or legal, your name is tied to something very dirty. This could affect your credit, your career, even your ability to keep the house. That's when it truly hit me. Melissa wasn't just using me for a soft landing. She was building a new paper identity on top of mine. If she failed, and she always failed, I'd be the one left holding the bag. She's not just lying, I said, more to myself than to him. She's preemptively erasing the damage by transferring it to me. And it was working. Because who would believe the quiet older sister, the one who stayed out of the spotlight over Melissa, the charming, chaotic, helpless baby of the family? I have to show this to my parents, I said. Charles didn't answer right away. Then, are they ready to see it? That stopped me, because no, they were. They still believed she was just going through a rough patch, still thought her charm was real and not weaponized, still thought I was being harsh, jealous even. If I showed them documents without context, they'd look for reasons to disbelieve them, to protect her. She nearly bankrupted someone once, I said softly, remembering the settlement we found. And now she's starting again, but this time she's using our name, our family. Charles reached into the folder and pulled out a printed page. Here's your angle, he said. A breakdown of the Portland case, real people, real losses. If your parents won't believe the fraud she's planting now, maybe they'll believe the trail she already left behind. I studied the document. It was a signed letter from a former investor, detailing how Melissa promised returns, faked permits, and disappeared before the city could shut the project down. The last line stuck with me. She left me with a foreclosure notice, a lawsuit, and a smile like it wasn't her fault. I read it 3 times. That was exactly her. That smile. That self-pity. That manipulation. I clenched my fists. She won't do it again, I said. Charles's voice was calm but steady. She won't, not to us. There was that word again, us. For a moment, the storm quieted inside me. Not because things were better, but because I finally felt like I wasn't fighting it alone. Melissa had no idea. She thought I was still standing in the doorway, stunned and helpless. But I was. I was building a case. And when the time came, I would bury her lies with the truth she couldn't outrun. The morning I decided to tell my parents the truth, I made French toast. Not because I thought it would soften the blow, but because it was something familiar, something that used to mean comfort in our house. When I was little, Sunday brunches were sacred. Dad would read the paper, Mom would hum along to the radio, and Melissa would steal strawberries off my plate when she thought no one was looking. I thought, maybe if I gave them something warm to eat, they'd finally listen. The table was set in the sunlit dining room. I had laid out everything with care: fresh fruit, syrup in a little glass pitcher, real napkins, not paper. The manila folder sat at my feet beneath the table, just out of sight. They arrived late. Mom wore a floral cardigan like she always did for family occasions. Dad looked tired but tried to smile. Melissa didn't come. I hadn't invited her. "Smells amazing," Mom said as she sat down. "Is that cinnamon?" I nodded. "Just like we used to make." For a few minutes we ate in silence, the clink of silverware the only sound between us. It was almost peaceful, until I reached under the table and placed the folder beside my plate. Dad raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "I need you both to read these," I said gently. "All of it, and then we need to talk." Mom hesitated. "Jennifer, what is this?" "Please," I said, trying to keep the shake out of my voice. "Just read." They exchanged a look, the kind married couples develop after decades of quiet negotiations. Then Dad opened the folder and started flipping through the pages. Mom leaned over, reading along. At first they were confused, then alarmed. And finally, by the time they reached the forged bank forms and the Portland lawsuit summary, something broke. My mother gasped. Her hand went to her mouth. "This can't be real." My father leaned back in his chair. His face had gone pale. "Where did you get these?" "I found them in Melissa's closet," I said quietly. "I've been digging with help. It's all true." My mother turned to me. "You think your sister forged these documents?" "I know she did." "But Jennifer," she said, her voice rising slightly, "Melissa isn't capable of something like this." I blinked. "You just read what she's capable of." "She's impulsive," Mom insisted. "Not criminal." "She's calculated," I corrected. "And she's been using your names, my address, our family as her smokescreen." There was a long, suffocating pause. Then Dad asked, "Why didn't you come to us sooner?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me." He didn't deny it, just looked down at his plate, the crusts of his toast untouched. I turned to Mom. "She's already pulled this once. You read it. She bankrupted someone in Portland. And she's starting again, this time with us." "She's been under so much pressure," Mom said, almost to herself. "She told us you were being cold, that you didn't want her around." I laughed bitterly. "She told you I was the problem," Mom nodded slowly. "She said you never forgave her, that you've always seen her as a burden." I stood up then, couldn't stay seated anymore. "That's not true," I said, louder than I meant to. "I gave her a room, a chance. I gave her my peace, and she used it to bury us." Another pause. And then from my father, "You always were the jealous one, Jennifer." The words landed like a slap. I froze. "What?" Dad looked at me, then back at the table. "You've always had this chip on your shoulder about Melissa ever since you were kids." My throat went dry. "Dad, are you listening to yourself?" "Maybe you want to believe this because it fits your version of her," he said, quieter now. "But forging documents, that's serious, and she's still your sister." "She's your daughter," I snapped. "And she's about to ruin you." My mother stood abruptly. "I think we should go." I laughed once, short and stunned. "You still can't see it." "She's family," Mom said, tears brimming in her eyes. "That means something." I looked at both of them, really looked. And I saw it, plain as day. They needed to believe in her, because admitting the truth meant admitting they'd enabled it, that they'd ignored the signs, that maybe love doesn't always save someone from who they choose to become. "Thank you for coming," I said finally, my voice calm again. "You can go now." My father walked out without another word. My mother paused at the door. "Please don't make this worse than it already is." I didn't answer because I wasn't making it worse. I was just the first one willing to look. I didn't cry after they left. I wanted to. I probably should have. But there was no space left for sadness, only strategy. Their refusal to believe what was right in front of them didn't break me. It clarified everything. Melissa wasn't just lying to them, she was relying on their refusal to question her. And now I understood why she had been so bold, so comfortable. She knew they'd defend her to the end no matter who she took down with her. But what she didn't know, I had stopped playing fair. That night I set the kitchen table for two. Candles, wine, the whole scene. Melissa walked in around 8, hair perfectly styled, eyeliner sharp enough to cut glass. She raised a brow. Wow, dinner. Is this an apology? I smiled, sweet and slow. Just wanted to talk, just us. She poured herself a generous glass of wine and kicked off her heels, settling in like a queen returning to her throne. You've been kind of distant lately, she said, taking a sip. Tense, I laughed softly. I know, I've been under a lot of pressure. Oh, trust me, she replied with a smirk. I know all about pressure. I let her talk. Let her swirl her glass and drop snide little jabs about jealous older sisters and how money doesn't buy happiness, as if I was the one manipulating her way through life with forged bank forms and stolen trust. We were 15 minutes into dinner when I reached for my phone. I placed it gently on the placemat beside me, screen down, still recording. So, I began lightly. What's the plan now? Melissa blinked. What do you mean? Well, you said you quit your job. And you're obviously not going back to your old place. So what's next? Where do you go from here? She gave me that fake pity smile. Honestly, I don't know. I thought maybe staying here would give me a chance to reset, get people to see me differently. I leaned in slightly. People like who? She shrugged. Mom, Dad, everyone, they only ever saw what they wanted to me failing, me flailing. But now that I'm calm, stable, bankrupting them might get their attention, I said softly. Melissa stilled. Just for a beat. Then slowly she smiled. You know what's funny? That's the exact word I used when I told Mom I was moving in, bankrupt. She didn't even flinch. My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my face still. You said that? I asked, voice low. Melissa grinned, drunk on the drama. I just want them to listen for once. And if losing a little money makes them finally hear me, then maybe that's what it takes, you know. I looked at her. This woman I used to share a bedroom with, who used to beg me for piggyback rides and sneak into my bed after nightmares. Now she was casually discussing financial destruction over Merlot. And me, I asked. What do I need to lose for you to feel seen? She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. I reached over and stopped the recording. Melissa's eyes narrowed. What was that? I picked up my phone and stood. That, I said, walking out of the kitchen, was your confession. I didn't slam the door to my room. I didn't scream. I just sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the sudden silence from the kitchen. The way her wine glass tapped the table, the subtle shift of a chair leg against hardwood. She knew I had her. And for the first time, Melissa didn't have a comeback. She had built a narrative around chaos. A character people pitied, defended, excused. But now she was on tape, smirking, sipping wine, and admitting intent. She thought she was manipulating me over dinner. But I'd been setting the table for her downfall. It came 2 mornings later, wrapped in a thick envelope like any other piece of mail. I found it on my doorstep, neatly placed, businesslike. No knock, no doorbell, just the quiet courtesy of paperwork waiting to shatter the illusion that I was winning. I didn't open it right away. My gut already knew. But when I did, the words leapt off the page like a slap to the face. Cease and desist filed on behalf of Melissa Claire Donnelly. Alleging unlawful recording, violation of consent statutes, harassment. I sank into the nearest chair, my hands trembling as I reread the first paragraph, again and again. Every sentence more surreal than the last. She'd flipped the script. I had evidence, truth, but Melissa had lawyers. Or at least she'd found someone willing to threaten me into silence. The irony nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. Across the room, she sat on the couch, flipping through a magazine like we weren't at war. I stared at her. She didn't even bother to look up. Oh, she said casually, did you get the mail? I stood there, crushed paper in hand, mouth dry. You really filed this? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. She smiled without teeth. You really thought you could record me in my own home? My home? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You admitted to sabotaging our parents, to draining them. I have the proof. Her eyes finally met mine. You had a recording, now you have a legal problem. The shift was complete. Gone was the woman who begged for understanding, who played the victim with trembling hands and teary eyes. This version of Melissa was sharp, smug, and fully in control, and I was suddenly the one in defense mode. She stood, smoothed her blouse, and walked past me with that same practiced air of nonchalance. "You crossed a line, sis," she whispered as she passed. "Now let's see how well you hold up when you're the one being watched." I couldn't move, not because I was afraid, but because the stakes had just changed. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about survival. I picked up the envelope again, forcing myself to breathe through the panic. Melissa wanted me scared, rattled, on edge. She wanted me second-guessing everything, my decisions, my actions, even the truth. But she had made one mistake. She had confirmed the recording's power. If it didn't matter, if it meant nothing, she wouldn't have sent that letter. And now I had to respond not with anger but with precision. That evening I met with my lawyer in a sleek downtown office. The walls were glass, the table cool steel. Everything felt cold, professional, and necessary. She scanned the document in silence, then looked up at me. "Do you have the original file?" I nodded, sliding over a flash drive. "Good," she said, plugging it in. "We'll start with an eviction filing. Simultaneously, I'll prepare a response to this letter. It's a scare tactic, nothing more. You're protected, but we're going to hit back legally, cleanly, and hard." For the first time in days, I exhaled fully. "She thinks she owns the narrative," I said quietly. "She's about to learn what it feels like," my lawyer replied, "when someone takes it back." The house was quiet when they arrived. I'd timed everything down to the hour. My lawyer had filed the eviction notice that morning, and I'd already packed every one of Melissa's belongings into boxes, taped, labeled, and neatly stacked on the porch like unwanted memories. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt resolved. It was late afternoon when my parents pulled into the driveway. They had agreed to talk at my request. I hadn't told them about the lawyer, or the lock change, or that this wasn't a conversation. It was a reckoning. I opened the door before they knocked. My father stepped in first, confused by the bare hallway. My mother followed, her eyes darting over the empty spaces where Melissa's things used to sprawl like vines. "Where is she?" she asked, already tense. "Outside," I said, "and she's not coming back in." Before they could react, I handed them a folder, thicker than the one from brunch, now loaded with legal filings, copies of the cease and desist, and the eviction order. It had the weight of finality. My father opened it slowly. My mother didn't touch it. "What is this?" he asked. "It's everything you refused to see," I said calmly, "and the legal action to protect this house from her." "You're kicking her out," my mom said, her voice breaking. "I'm ending the damage," I replied. "You may not believe what she's done, but I have proof, and now I have boundaries." That's when Melissa appeared behind them, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "This is dramatic, even for you," she said. I met her gaze. "You used our parents' names to open accounts. You used mine to revive your fake business, and when I caught you, you tried to silence me with legal threats." She smirked. "Still stuck on that. You're not welcome here," I said, louder now. "Your things are outside, your keys won't work, this ends now." My mother gasped, stepping between us. "Jennifer, you can't just throw her out like a criminal." I turned to her slowly. "She is one." Melissa scoffed. "Please, you're just bitter that I'm not who you want me to be." "No," I said, voice calm, steady. "I'm angry that you're exactly who I feared you were." Silence hung like a storm cloud. My father flipped through the folder again, slower this time. His face sagged as he read Melissa's forged signature beside his own. A quiet groan escaped him. "What have we done?" he whispered. Melissa's smirk faltered. I watched him crumble under the weight of it, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed him to finally see it, to look past the performance, to see the woman she had become. My mother turned away, hands shaking. I stood taller. "This house was a home," I said. "Until she turned it into a cover story, I won't let her bury us in her lies." Melissa didn't speak. She just stood there, face hardening, jaw clenched. For once, she didn't have a clever response. I opened the door. "This is goodbye, Melissa." She walked past me slowly, her heels clicking against the floor, each step sounding like a closing chapter. As she stepped outside, the afternoon sun hit her face, and for a second I thought I saw regret. But no apology came, just a glance over her shoulder and a muttered, "You'll regret this." I didn't flinch. My mother collapsed onto the porch steps, her shoulders trembling, whispering, "What have we done?" I stepped inside, locked the door behind me. and whispered, "Not anymore." The house was still. Not peaceful, not yet, just still. I stood by the window for what felt like an hour, watching Melissa disappear down the street. She didn't look back. Not once. Her boxes sat untouched at the edge of the porch, like artifacts of a life she'd tried to fake and failed to maintain. The silence that followed didn't feel like victory. It felt like the moment after an earthquake, when everything's technically intact but nothing feels safe anymore. Behind me, my parents sat quietly at the kitchen table. My father stared at the folder in his lap. My mother's hands trembled around her tea mug. No one spoke, until finally I did. "She was counting on your denial," I said softly. "That's how she gets away with it. She knew you'd never ask the hard questions. She knew you'd pick her story over reality." My father looked up at me, and for the first time I saw shame. Not anger, not blame. Just the raw weight of realizing he'd been fooled by his own child. "I thought she needed help," he whispered. "Did," I replied, "but not the kind you gave." My mother blinked slowly, her voice barely audible. "We thought we were saving her." "You were enabling her," I said. "And I know that's hard to hear, but you didn't just let her stay, you let her use us. You defended her, you doubted me, you told me I was jealous." I didn't mean to let my voice break, but it did. And suddenly I wasn't composed. I wasn't calm. I was just the daughter who had carried the weight of someone else's destruction and been blamed for noticing. "I begged you to see her clearly," I said, "and you chose not to." Tears welled in my mother's eyes. "I didn't want to believe it," she said. "She's my baby." I sat down across from her, my voice gentler now. "I know, but loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy others." Another long pause. Then my father closed the folder and placed it carefully on the table. "I'll start calling the banks," he said. "We need to make this right." I nodded. That was all I needed. Not an apology, not even understanding, just action. Just finally someone else standing beside me in the aftermath. Later that night, the house felt different. The air clearer. Like Melissa's lies had left with her heels clicking down the sidewalk. I sat on the floor of the living room, legs tucked beneath me, wine glass untouched. I didn't feel powerful or triumphant. I just felt like myself again. I had protected what mattered. I had told the truth, even when it cost me peace. And in the end, I had saved more than just the house. I had saved my name. Weeks passed. Not many. Just enough to let the dust settle, the silence grow roots, and the mailbox feel safe again. I had started sleeping with the bedroom window cracked. Not because the nights were cooler, but because the air inside finally felt mine again. Every corner of the house no longer echoed with doubt or manipulation. Melissa's presence had been loud in its absence, but quieter each day. And then on a Wednesday, an email from my mother. Subject, "I'm sorry. It wasn't long, just a paragraph, really. Jennifer, I didn't see what I should have. I didn't listen when it counted. You were protecting us and we didn't protect you. I don't expect things to go back to how they were, but I want you to know I'm proud of you. I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner. Love, Mom." I read it twice. And then again. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just exhaled. Not because the apology erased the hurt, but because it acknowledged it. And for someone like my mother, who spoke in gestures more than words, that email was a seismic shift. Still, I didn't rush to respond. I needed time to decide what I wanted, what I would allow back in. Because once you've been gaslit by your own blood, you don't just reopen the door. You put up a new lock, a clear sign, and a password no one gets without earning it. That weekend, my father called. Not to plead, not to guilt trip, just to update. He'd contacted every bank on the list, flagged the accounts, begun clearing the damage, quietly, methodically, like he was trying to unwrite the parts of the story he'd ignored. We didn't talk about Melissa. We didn't need to. The line had been drawn. She was outside it. I finally replied to my mother's email the next morning. "Thank you for the message. You're welcome in my life, but not in my home. That's a boundary I need to keep. I hope you understand." She replied within minutes. "I do." And just like that, the dynamic shifted. I wasn't the daughter fighting for space anymore. I was the woman who owned it. No more sleeping with one eye open. No more checking for tampered mail or missing heirlooms. No more second-guessing the difference between love and manipulation. The house became quiet again, not haunted, just healed. Sometimes I still sat in the armchair by the window, the one Melissa never liked because it did photograph well. I'd sip coffee, feet tucked under me, and look around at everything I'd reclaimed. And I'd think, peace is not something someone gives you. It's something you decide to protect, at all costs. A year later, I didn't even think about her. Not when I hung the twinkle lights on the patio. Not when I laid out the cheese board or picked the playlist. Not even when my new neighbor asked, "So what brought you to Austin?" I smiled, poured her a drink, and simply said, "A fresh start." That evening, my new home was filled with the sound of laughter, glass clinks, and the comforting chaos of people who hadn't known me during the storm. They just knew me now. Strong, settled, free. I had left the old house behind in February, sold it quietly, privately. No drama, no drawn-out announcements, just a clean break. The foundation had been cracked, not structurally, but spiritually. And I wanted to build something on new ground. My apartment wasn't flashy. 2 bedrooms, 1 balcony, and just enough space for quiet mornings and lively dinners. But it was mine. Every corner bore my decisions, my fingerprints, my peace. Charles was there too, still him, still solid. He helped me hang the floating shelves without comment, but when he pulled me into the kitchen that night, he looked at me with something deeper than affection. "I've never seen you like this," he whispered. "Like what?" "Unburdened." And he was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't managing someone else's damage, I was living. When one of the party guests, someone from Charles's office, asked, "Do you have any siblings?" I didn't flinch. I didn't dodge the question. I just offered a quiet smile and said, "Some people you love from a distance." And the conversation moved on. No one pried, no one pushed, because peace is magnetic when you wear it right. It tells people what they need to know without saying everything out loud. I still had the folder, locked away just in case. Not because I was afraid she'd come back, but because I wanted to remember what I survived, what I chose to survive, not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. The party lingered into the night. When the last guests left and the lights dimmed, I curled up on the couch beside Charles, my head on his shoulder. We didn't talk about the past. We just watched the stars blink above the balcony railing. And I thought, some stories don't end with fireworks. They end with a closed door, a full heart, and a quiet room you can finally call your own.